earth, fire, wind, water. And what if I add a little bit of sustainability to that? Well, then the Captain Planet of 2019 would have to speak about the importance of economic, environmental and social sustainability. You know, sustainability is an essential characteristic of any business, and businesses today need to be financially, environmentally and socially sustainable for the business to stay around for the long term. Hello and welcome to A Step Ahead, a special initiative by HSBC Commercial Banking and ET Now, where on the series we're putting the spotlight on organizations that are setting new benchmark. On this special episode, we're meeting a company that has adopted a sustainable business model to stay a step ahead of competition. We're meeting Gurugram-based Renew Power. Renew Power, the largest renewable energy IPP in India in terms of total energy generation capacity, operates more than 100 utility-scale projects spread across 8 states in India, generating 1% of India's total electricity. Over the years, the company has grown exponentially and has a current renewable asset base of over 7 gigawatts, of which more than 4 gigawatts is operational. Committed to a sustainable future, Renew Power is leading a change in the country's current energy portfolio by delivering cleaner and smarter energy choices and thereby reducing India's carbon footprint. And I'm now joined by Sumant Sinha, the Chairman and Managing Director of Renew Power. Thank you, Sumant, for joining us. Renewable power sector is quite the talk of town. The government is gung-ho about it. But I believe India is currently generating about 9% of its power from renewable sources. Do you think the government's current target, is that achievable by 2022?
I think you're absolutely right. Renewable energy is the way of the future. We're actually in the midst of a massive energy transition at this point in time. You can perhaps call it the third energy transition globally. The first one was towards coal, then from coal to petrol, and then now, of course, into renewable energy sources. Now, in terms of the government's targets, the government has set a target of trying to get to 175 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2022. Currently, we have installed about 75, and there's another 25 that is in construction right now. So you may say that we're close to about 100 gigawatts. So we have to actually do another 75 gigawatts in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years' time.
Right.
My feeling is that we'll probably end up close to maybe 140, 150 gigawatts of commissioned capacity, but the full 175 would probably have got auctioned out by that point in time.
Okay.
And so give it another year to 18 months, all of that will get constructed. So I would say that the government would be very close to achieving their target. The interesting thing now is, what beyond 2022?
Yeah.
And there, the good news is that if you look forward at, let's say, 2030 time frame, the government is already talking about a target of up to 500 gigawatts by 2030, which means that we have to add almost close to about 40 gigawatts every year, even beyond 2022, compared to the current pace of only about 15 gigawatts that we're adding. So I think this is a sector that is set for growth. It's a very important sector. And I'm glad that the government is moving towards cleaner sources in such an aggressive manner, because that, given all the issues around us on climate change and pollution, is absolutely the need of the hour.
Do you think this will definitely help us to one day reach the mark where every house in every corner of the country at every minute of the day and night will have electricity, no more load shedding, no more power cuts?
We are well on our way.
Yeah.
As you know, electricity has now reached every single village in India. The government's target is to make sure that electricity reaches every single household in India as well. Then the question becomes one of supply of the power. I think, look, what's happening is that renewable energy now has become cheaper than any other source of energy, right? The cost of new solar or the cost of new wind energy is only about 260 to 3 rupees or thereabouts. And compared to, let's say, conventional sources of power, which are perhaps 4 rupees, 450. And the most important thing is that renewable energy prices are stable for the next 25 years.
Right.
Because once you've made the capital investment, there's almost no other cost after that. And so I think just looking at the dynamic of the cost implication, it is clear to me that renewables is going to be the way forward. The second thing is that renewables, and particularly solar, has this incredible characteristic where you can set up 1,000, 2,000 megawatt solar farms in, let's say, rural areas. But you can equally set up a 10 kilowatt plant
Yes.
on a solar rooftop.
Right.
And so therefore, it's a much more democratic source of energy. And it really puts control of energy in the hands of a normal homeowner. And so any homeowner therefore can put up solar on their rooftop
Yes.
along with battery based solutions, and perhaps in fact even start generating energy, surplus energy, which can then be fed into the grid and actually convert that into in a way an income stream.
Yes.
And the government is actually trying to do that with respect to the farmer sector, where they're actually trying, they've come out with the scheme called Kusum, where the idea is actually that every farmer who has surplus land should be allowed to set up solar power, which can then be connected to the grid, and actually that surplus energy generation can then be used as a source of income as well.
Of course.
So solar has fairly unique characteristics which I think are not that common in other sources of energy.
The other thing, Suman, that's happened recently is people are becoming more and more aware about the need to be more environmentally friendly in their day-to-day lives, and also corporates, organizations. In corporate India, do you see more and more companies becoming aware of turning their business models, giving it more of a sustainable hook?
There are lots of things that corporates can do, and not even, corporates to me are a part of civil society, and individuals as well as corporates can do a lot on their day-to-day life. So first of all, all corporates can take a pledge that they want to become carbon neutral in their operations by whatever period of time.
Yes.
They'll have to do an audit of how much carbon they emit, right, in running the head offices, in the travel that the people undertake, in the production facilities that they may have, or whatever be their business, right? So that's one simple thing. The second thing is that plastics, for example, as you know, is a very, very critical area.
Yes.
We have
Yes.
massive environmental degradation. There's millions of tons of plastic now in the oceans. It's threatening marine life. So we have to move away from single-use plastics. And then I think beyond that, every company has to look at also what are the other areas in which they are despoiling the environment, whether through emissions, whether it's through sewage, whatever it might be. And I think they have to go down the path of making sure that all of those things are curtailed, and that in fact, instead of degrading the environment, they actually work on improving the environment.
Yeah.
And even simple things like making sure that their office buildings are certified by an energy efficiency rating agency, right? Whether it's LEED or whether it's Greyhound,
Yes,
any one of
yes.
these agencies, right? So do those kinds of things. So there's a lot that companies can do to control emissions, and then secondly, go from that to actually becoming propagators of making their employees follow similar policies in their home and day-to-day lives.
So when we talk about a sustainable business, it's not just one important part is being environmentally sustainable. The other part is being socially sustainable, and even looking at some angles of governance, plus being financially sustainable. Your thoughts on that?
So sustainability as a word has literally, I would say, two different meanings, right? One is to make sure that the business continues
Yes.
and is sustainable as a business. And the second is the sustainability part of it,
Yeah.
which is the, let's say, the clean, the environmentally friendly part of it, or the socially friendly part of it. So I think to talk about the first part, obviously our intention is to build a business that lasts for the long term, that is not here, just to create a few megawatts on the ground and then go, for us to go off and do something else. Right from our very beginning as a company, we've always been focused on the long term. We've been focused on creating a business that survives, irrespective of who's there in terms of shareholders, in terms of management team.
Yes.
We want the business to carry on, because the business is in some ways doing what I would consider a very noble purpose,
Yes.
which is it's providing clean energy to India and helping therefore clean up the country's emissions and the atmosphere. So I think a lot of those building blocks are now in place, and therefore the company's sustainability therefore in terms of its business in the future, I think now, given where we are, is I think in a fairly good position at this point in time. Now, in terms of the sustainability part of it, in terms of the corporate the corporate social responsibility, I think we've taken our social responsibility very seriously as a company, and therefore right from our inception, we have always made sure that we are, wherever we operate, we are good neighbors in the community. Because the communities within which we operate are usually rural areas, far away from urban locations, and in those areas, there's a lot that you can do.
Of course.
So depending on the needs of the local community, We either help set up women's self-help groups, or we help set up schools, or if the schools are there, we help provide computers, we provide water and sanitation in certain other areas. We've set up solar water ATMs as well. So we've done a whole variety of different things in different communities where we operate, with the intention that, look, ultimately, if we're going to be in these communities for the next 25 years, then we have to be seen as good partners and good neighbors. So that has been the underlying philosophy. But beyond that, while of course you have CSR limits and so on of how much you're supposed to spend, we have consistently spent much more than our limits have asked us to do, simply because we think it's the right thing to do. And I would say our shareholders have been very supportive in that endeavor.
I think that's the most important part. It should not, it can be that limit can be a guidance, but of course always go ahead if you're right. All right, Sumant, it's time for a quick break. We'll continue our conversation on the other side. Don't go anywhere. You're watching HSBC Commercial Banking and ET Now present A Step Ahead. On the other side, my conversation with Sumant Sinha continues, and I'll also be joined by Rajat Verma from HSBC India. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to HSBC Commercial Banking and ET Now present A Step Ahead. My conversation with Sumant Sinha, the Chairman and Managing Director of Renew Power, continues, and I'm also joined by Rajat Verma. He's the MD and Head at Commercial Banking at HSBC India. Hi Rajat, welcome to the conversation that Sumant and me are having. Rajat, to kickstart here with you, just wanting to get to know the approach of HSBC towards sustainability. How's your company looking at it?
So I think sustainability sits right at the top of our agenda globally, not just in India, and we see this both as a social objective but also as a commercial objective. So we think of sustainability in three slightly different, very clear three different ways. Obviously, the first one is around financing. Financing could be arrangement, debt provision, investment, etc., etc. The other one is really around supply chains, because we feel that if you want to impact the ecosystem in a larger way, you got to go beyond the large companies and what's clearly obvious, what's staring you into the eyes, because the world is a web of these supply chains. And I think our third approach to sustainability is more around the people agenda, around skilling and employability of communities, essentially. And you see that in India as well. We are one of the largest investments is in India, actually, around skill development. So these are broadly the three constructs how we think about sustainability.
Sure. Sumant, when you look at the renewable power space in India, of course, like earlier we spoke about how it's picking up pace, but do you see, of course, so it's open to more challengers, I mean, more competitors can come in. What do you think kind of would be able to differentiate Renew in that space, and how would other companies fare in this space? Because yes, it's a growing market.
The scale of challenge is so vast, or the scale of the opportunity is so vast, and the amount of capital that is required is so humongous that it's not enough for just one or two or three companies to come in and do this job. You need multiple companies. You need all sorts of companies. You need all sorts of capital providers to come in.
Yes.
And therefore, I would say the more people that come into the sector, the better, because it is better for the planet as a whole. It is better for the country as a whole. So I would say that, look, it doesn't matter to me whether I have 3% or 5% market share of this space, right? Because I'll probably be able to raise whatever capital I can and invest as much as I can. But we need many more people to be doing a lot more.
Rajat, coming to you, one other thought on this is, from a banker's perspective, would a company that is sustainably being aware be something looked at as positively from the banking angle?
There's enough research, if you read through the research on this, including HSBC's own research, which suggests that sustainable companies have been doing better than companies who have not been sustainable, or who have fallen off on the sustainability ranking or rating, etc. There seems to be some clear evidence of their stock price moving in a different way. Certainly, maybe less discernible in the middle of the pack, but right at the top end of people who are really sustainable, companies who are really sustainable, companies who have really fallen off the radar, you can see that their movement has been quite different. So I think more than just pricing or these kind of, those are factors of the individual credit and the circumstances in the investor set, etc. But does it open up a new set of investors and a whole new way that banks and investors have started looking at companies? The answer is yes, clearly. If you look at the data, I think sustainable bonds were around $200 billion globally, of which renewable energy was the biggest, of course, at 150 billion or so.
Right.
So these are big movements over a period of time. So yes, so it's important.
Sumant, one thing that is always looked upon in this sector, especially renewable, is R&D, so innovations, you could say, which of course in technology is required, but in renewable also there is scope always to kind of push the way ahead. So what's your take on the R&D at Renew? How's that happening?
So, you know, our R&D is a little bit different from what you might call, let's say, manufacturing R&D, because we're not a manufacturing company. Our job is, we're an EPC company, we execute projects on the ground, and then we run those assets. Yeah. So, the kind of R&D that we require to do is really on how do we improve the asset performance? How do we improve, in the future, grid integration of renewables into the overall grid system? How do we work more closely with battery-based solutions to reduce intermittency of renewable energy? So those are the kinds of things that we are working on. And there it's not so much about doing fundamental R&D, let's say, on which battery chemistry is going to work better, but more in terms of how to come up with a good battery management system that can interface with your renewable energy supply to give you the best possible outcomes. So it's those kind of things that we're working on. And what we've done actually in that regard is we've set up a renewable energy research center at IIT Delhi in conjunction with IIT Delhi to research some of these areas. And we're also working on some topics like that, for example, with professors from Stanford University and with Columbia on specific areas of research on how to improve overall performance of our machines and get more value out of them.
You know, for manufacturers or for other companies, Rajat, the one thing is supply chain. Your thoughts on the area of supply chain finance? How's it panning out? What's being done in that space by HSBC to again, you know, help organizations make better sustainable models, better sustainable business models for themselves?
So let's say if you're a large format retailer, or if you're if you have access to a massive supply chain, your ability to influence that supply chain can be controlled by the one person who's buying from this supply chain, right? And therefore, rather than this being a democratic process of everybody trying to correct everybody, you can start from the top and say, okay, if we support your supply chain in financing, we would support the more sustainable suppliers more than we would other suppliers, either by more debt or by better pricing and so on. And again, I guess the challenge really is to try to scale it and get the right metrics in. But if you're able to get the metrics in, it's massively powerful because you can scale in a world that is integrating. And for HSBC, which is connected across the world with across 60 countries, it's massively powerful for us to try to scale that up. The amount of sustainable financing that is there is small. So you are at a stage where renewable financing has still progressed, but other forms of financing, like I mentioned, supply chain, right? How do you massively increase the scope of making everybody in that supply chain possible, more sustainable? You have to be, lenders and banks and governments, etc., have to be able to influence that in a more direct way. We are definitely trying to do that in certain programs, but it's not. It's still. I would still say that it's at a really early stage.
Right. Sumant, just last couple of questions. Just the way ahead for Renew. For you, Renew Power, the next, I don't know, 10, 15 years, what can we expect?
We are in the midst of an energy transition, the likes of which we haven't seen in several generations. We are going to get to a point where further technology evolution will continue to happen. It will make renewables and batteries together a baseload solution at a fairly attractive pricing level, and that, to my mind, will be the next step to revolutionize the penetration of renewables into the grid. And so I see growth in this sector for the next at least 30 to 50 years. And that is therefore going to offer almost limitless opportunities for companies like ours to capitalize on this opportunity.
Maybe if I can ask Sumant the question here. So rooftop solar, does that have a future in India? It should, intuitively.
Yeah. No, look, I think it does. I think the big advantage that India has is that we are a solar-rich country, and therefore, and with the phenomenally low cost of installation that we have, it means that the cost of solar energy in India is actually very low. And if you look at so many cities in India, there's so many flat roofs. You know, if you just stand on any high place and you look across at the city, you'll see so many homes that have flat roofs on top, and all of those roofs to me are exploitable by setting up solar power. I think the important thing there is the evolution of the grid, because the grid suddenly has to be able to manage in a situation where in the middle of the day, if everybody puts up solar rooftops, in the middle of the day, suddenly demand for grid power will go down, and in the evenings it will suddenly spike up again. So the grid needs to have the ability of managing that massive change and fluctuation over time. And if that is possible, then distribution companies will be a lot more open about encouraging more solar rooftop solutions. Today it's harder to do, because if I have surplus power in the middle of the day or in weekends or days when I'm not at home, what do I do with it as a homeowner? I have to have the flexibility of being able to put that into the grid. And so the grid has to give me a proper price for it and has to be able to absorb it. Those rules today in India are still fairly nascent.
That's right,
and those have to really evolve to make this much more powerful.
No, I agree.
So I think, yes, that's definitely something that hopefully if it works out, it would be really good. Rajat, just before we wind up, there's always talk about the triple bottom line, the people, planet and profit. Just again, I spoke to Sumant about Renew Power. I'm speaking to you generally about India Inc. The next 10, 15 years, do you see more and more emphasis on the triple P bottom line and more companies waking up and doing not just lip service, but actually steps on the ground that will help us all be sustainable and better businesses as a better nation?
So I think increasingly in companies, there's a recognition that there is value in this, as I mentioned, both with equity and debt holders, at least in terms of investment, even if the pricing bit hasn't come in. But there is, and that value will keep increasing. There's no debate about that, right? The way that I think renewable energy has come in, the next EV is going to come in a big way, and you can see the way that is going to move. Hand on heart, if you were to ask me how many companies are specific in the manner that we would want to be, and which makes it very actionable, I think that is significantly lower than it should be.
Yes.
So, I mean, my only I wouldn't say advice, but suggestion would be, look, if you are committed as a promoter to a specific, to a sustainable goal, and you feel it works for you, works for the planet, the triple P model, then you have to be specific about what those goals are. And that could be in many ways. You could say, okay, I'm going to buy from suppliers who are sustainable. I'm not going to do this. I will reduce my carbon footprint by so and so, etc., etc. But for that, you have to measure it, and then you have to deliver to it. So it's like any other business goal. So you have to treat it as a business goal. That's how I look at it. And I think right now we're not there.
Thank you so much, Rajat, for your time. Thank you, Sumant, for your time. Well, that's all on this episode of A Step Ahead, a special initiative by HSBC Commercial Banking and ET Now. We'll be back next time with another company. But before we go, here are some key takeaways from this episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Organizations need to follow sustainable practices that need to be aligned with the business, their supply chain model, and the environment on the whole. The renewable energy sector is poised for more growth, and there is a large scope for companies to grow in this sector. More companies are managing sustainability to improve processes, pursue growth, and add value rather than focusing on reputation alone.